So imagine this, you're driving down the road and then all of a sudden, tap, somebody hits you and your airbag explodes.
Do I have a case?
Well, welcome to video 4 of our Do I Have a Case video series. I'm Joel and this is Chase, and today we want to answer a question for you that we get a lot, and that is, I've been in a minor car wreck and my airbag exploded and hurt me. Do I have a case? And who do I have that case against?
Yes, you have that case, and it's always at least going to be against the person who caused the wreck, the person that hit you, right? So under this kind of play fact scenario we're talking about, it's a relatively minor wreck, but hard enough to where the airbags deploy. And let's say the airbags, you might have heard in the news with the shrapnel, right? There are some products defects and things like that that we could get into. We're not going to in this video, but if there is that angle, that's something you can certainly explore, right? The most common is the Takata airbags where shrapnel would go and, you know, cut your face and things like that. But we're not really going to talk about that here. We're going to talk about just if you get in that wreck, you have the airbag, you get the whiplash, who's the case against? And it's almost always going to be against the person that caused the wreck. Yeah,
that's for sure. And there's a very specific reason that for minor car wrecks where the injuries are not catastrophic, that it's usually not a good idea to pursue the product's liability case against the manufacturer or designer or seller or all these different type products cases you can bring. And that's because they are very expensive, and you would never spend $100,000, $200,000 to pursue a case that may bring you $100,000 or $200,000 because you net zero. So why would you do that? But there's been a big evolution in the time that from the time airbags were invented until they started being installed in cars, all the way up until present day, and they've become safer and safer and safer. Although some of them are still defective in several ways, but you know, way back in the 90s, they used to explode so fast they would literally crush your face sometimes. The sensors didn't work sometimes. Golly, there's just been so many different things in the evolution of the airbags, and obviously, like Chase said, Takata and the shrapnel is the most obvious one. But let's just say that you're in a wreck and you don't think your airbag should explode, but it does. Now, if your airbag explodes in a minor wreck and like paralyzes you or causes a severe closed head injury or something like that, you may have a different story. It may be worth pursuing that product's case. But outside of that specific scenario, if your airbag explodes because somebody ran into you, well, it's still the person who ran into you's fault, right? They're responsible for the subsequent events that happen in that chain, if you will, of events that causes your injury. So in that type situation, if it's not economically feasible to go after the airbag manufacturer or seller or designer, then you look at it more like a regular car wreck case. And how would you do that, Chase?
Right, so I think it kind of boils down to, is it reasonably foreseeable that if you were to hit someone that the airbag would deploy, and that if the airbag deploys, it could also injure someone on top of the car wreck? And the answer to that question is yes. And so you would go about it just like you would any, you know, I don't want to say run-of-the-mill because every car wreck case is different, but any run-of-the-mill car wreck case, right? Find out how much insurance there is, look at the injuries. I can think of a case we had years ago where it was a relatively minor wreck. The airbag deployed and it caused really bad burns. And the burns were the primary injury. I don't recall there being any, like, you know, neck, back, or anything that you'd kind of see. It was just the burns. And that turned out to be a pretty valuable case, which otherwise wouldn't have been if it weren't for the airbag. But the person who caused the wreck they don't get to complain and say, well, I didn't, you know, force the airbag to be deployed and I wasn't the one that burned the person. It doesn't matter. If it's reasonably foreseeable that that wreck will cause those injuries, then you can recover from the at-fault person.
Yeah, and there's so many different ways to approach it, because the at-fault person, if they believe that a faulty or defective airbag caused your injuries, and at least in the state of Georgia, they can try to blame the airbag manufacturer. We call that, you know, apportioning fault to a non-party, or they could even bring them into the lawsuit as a third party. But in order for the at-fault driver to successfully defer blame to the airbag manufacturer, they would have to hire experts, and they would basically have to prosecute. Yeah, they'd have to prosecute their own defective products case. And so they're going through the same economic analysis that you would when you're deciding whether to sue the airbag manufacturer, because if they could settle your case for $100,000 or $200,000, but they know it's going to cost them that to pursue the third-party case or to try to blame the non-party airbag manufacturer by hiring experts and running all these tests and that kind of thing, then it doesn't really make sense for them to do that. They should settle your claim instead and avoid paying all that extra money.
That's right. Yeah, and I think too with just airbag cases in general, there are a lot of other injuries that can stem from the airbag, and it's tough to make the argument if you're the defendant, the person who caused the wreck, like, well, the airbag shouldn't have deployed or the airbag shouldn't have done this. Well, it's a safety feature, right? And if the safety feature is working properly, which more times than not it is, it's very hard from a trial perspective to get up there and say, well, the airbag deployed and it hurt you, so that shouldn't have happened. It's like, well, no, that's how it was designed to happen. And just because an injury happened after that, you're still on the hook for it.
Yeah. But just to sum it all up, if you're looking at a car wreck and the airbags have deployed, if there's not catastrophic injuries, it's probably not going to make economic sense to pursue a case against the airbag designer, manufacturer, or seller. However, if there are catastrophic injuries, there's certain things you can look for. Did the airbag system operate as it was designed to do? So for example, if it's just a rear end collision, it's normally the forward-facing airbag is not supposed to deploy. Right. If it's a side collision, then the side curtain airbag should deploy. If the airbag, if it's a minor collision or minor bumper tapper case and all the airbags deploy and they cause serious injuries, well, that's kind of an oddity. Like, there's something wrong with that. Like, this should not have happened with a wreck of this minor magnitude, right? Or that where you can't even see the bump on the fender, but all the airbags are deployed and you're sitting there with somebody paralyzed in the car. Well, something went seriously wrong with the safety system there. So in those situations, then you definitely want to reach out to a private liability attorney that knows how to handle that stuff. But for the most part, in moderate to minor injury cases, you're going to direct your claim towards the person who actually caused the wreck.
That's right.
All right, well, we hope this video has been helpful to you. If so, give us a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and we will see you next week.